I smell that. Oh, dude, that smells like straight alcohol, dude. That smells like it's.
Alright guys, buckle, because today we're looking at one of the most confusing evolutions I've ever seen on YouTube. And I don't mean confusing in a wow, this is complex kind of way. I mean confusing in the same way you'd feel watching someone microwave a fork and act surprised when sparks start flying. So there's this guy known as King Cobra JFS. For years, he's built a reputation doing something very specific, taking normal food and turning it into something that looks like it should be studied in a lab. We're talking combinations that feel less like meals and more like dares. The kind of stuff where halfway through watching, you're not even hungry anymore. You're just concerned. Over the years, he didn't stop at the weirdest snacks. He kept pushing, experimenting, testing limits, and eventually, eating questionable creations wasn't enough. He started making his own alcohol. Now, on paper, that sounds fine. People make homemade wine all the time. It's a pretty simple process if you follow the rules. That's the key part though, if you follow the rules. Because the moment he starts, it becomes very clear rules are not part of this experience. This all begins when he decides he wants to try making wine himself. He does a bit of research and comes to a very simple conclusion. You need juice, sugar, and yeast. That's it.
Homemade winemaking. I Googled it, and you can use just plain old instant yeast to make wine. You need like 3 ingredients basically. You need some kind of juice, pure cane granulated sugar, and some instant yeast. And of course, a measuring cup.
Instead of using proper tools, he's improvising everything. He doesn't have the right equipment, so he's pouring sugar into the container by hand, spilling a good portion of it in the process. At one point, he even acknowledges that he's losing a lot of it, and instead of fixing the method, he just decides to add more.
I don't have a funnel, so I have to be somewhat diligent about it. And this isn't gonna work. I need to use my hands. Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. Because I don't know, I lost a good third of it pouring it. I dig it. I'm also 80% British. Yeah, let's just dump a bunch of that in there. There we go. That should do it. Bloody hell. Shake it up. Shake it, but don't break it.
Now, normally, this process takes around 2 weeks. That's how long it takes for yeast to properly break down the sugar and produce alcohol. But waiting 2 weeks requires patience, and patience doesn't really exist here. So after less than half that time, he decides it's ready. He opens the bottle, takes a smell, and immediately concludes that it's strong. Then he pours himself a glass and tries it. And just like with everything else he's made, he says it's good. Not just tolerable, not just okay. Good.
That definitely tastes like alcohol. I ain't gonna stunt. My first attempt at homemade hooch, not half bad, dude. You can't get botulism from doing this, so be careful.
Now, in his mind, this worked. There's no reason to improve anything, no reason to question the process. As far as he's concerned, he just successfully made alcohol at home. But in reality, what he's created is something very different, and the more he believes it's a success, the more dangerous it's about to become. Because after that first successful batch, instead of slowing down or improving anything, he starts experimenting. The second batch follows the exact same foundation: juice, sugar, yeast, but now he decides to add honey. Now, to be fair, honey is actually used in real mead making. In the right conditions, with proper preparation, it works perfectly fine. But again, that's under controlled conditions. What's happening here is the complete opposite of controlled. There's still no real measurement, no proper sanitization, no consistency in how anything is being handled. It's just ingredients being added based on instinct. And somehow, that instinct is always telling him to add more sugar. Every single time. So this new batch ends up being even heavier, even thicker, and even more unpredictable than the first one. But the biggest problem isn't even the ingredients, it's what he does during the process. Instead of letting the mixture sit untouched while it ferments, he keeps going back to it, opening it, checking it, sampling it directly from the container, which completely defeats the purpose. Fermentation relies on a controlled environment. The moment you keep opening it and introducing outside bacteria, you're no longer just fermenting something, you're contaminating it. And he does this repeatedly. He'll take a sip, react to it, then seal it back up and let it sit again like nothing happened.
Look at that! It's the wine. You know what I did, YouTube? I unscrewed the lid, let the balloon deflate, and then I gave it a little one of these numbers. Last time I was making homemade wine, the bottle did this. It formed the head and everything. Because the Tampico has preservatives in it, I added extra sugar for the yeast and a whole bottle of freaking raw honey. So there you go. This is some good looking homemade mead, man. I hope it turns out. It smells kind of bready.
At that point, whatever is growing inside that bottle is no longer predictable. It's not just yeast anymore, it's everything. And despite all of that, he continues to treat it like it's improving. He'll show it on camera, talk about how it looks, how it smells, how it's progressing. But visually, it starts to change. It gets cloudier, thicker, less like a drink, and more like something that shouldn't be in a bottle to begin with. And yet, every time he checks it, he reassures himself that it's working, that it's turning into real alcohol. But here's the reality of what's happening. The juice he's using contains preservatives, which directly interfere with yeast activity. That alone already limits how much alcohol can even be produced. Then you add in the constant exposure to outside bacteria, inconsistent ingredients, and lack of proper fermentation time. And what you're left with isn't strong homemade alcohol. It's barely alcohol at all. At best, it's a weak, unstable mixture. At worst, it's something that could actually make him sick. But none of that registers, because as long as it smells strong and tastes different from regular juice, he believes it's working. And that belief is what pushes everything even further. Because now that he's comfortable with the process, he decides to take another step. And this is where things stop being just careless and start becoming genuinely concerning. Because instead of just changing the liquid ingredients, he starts adding solid food into the mix. We're talking bananas, strawberries, chunks of fruit going straight into the bottle. No preparation, no proper breakdown, no real understanding of how any of this works in fermentation. Just whole pieces being dropped in like he's making a smoothie that got lost on the way to the blender.
Strawberry banana mead. Make some room for our sugar and our honey and our banana and our strawberries. Next we're going to add one whole banana in there, a handful of strawberries. Then we're going to add some Jumex strawberry banana nectar from concentrate. Now we're going to let it ferment, watch it do its thing.
Now, in proper brewing, fruit can be used, but it's handled carefully, cleaned, processed, measured, and monitored. Here, it's just thrown in. And it doesn't take much to understand why that's a problem. Fruit doesn't just sit there politely while everything ferments. It breaks down, it rots, it introduces its own bacteria into the mix. So now, instead of just dealing with whatever was already happening inside that bottle, you've added another layer of unpredictability on top of it. And somehow, the process still manages to get worse, because eventually, it's time to separate the liquid from the fruit. And this is one of those moments where you expect some level of caution. Maybe a proper strainer, maybe a cleaner setup, something. Instead, he uses his hands, just straight into the mixture, grabbing, holding, pouring, trying to filter it manually while it spills everywhere. It's messy, it's uncontrolled, and it completely defeats whatever little structure the process had left. At one point, pieces of fruit fall right back into the liquid. And instead of stopping or fixing it, he just keeps going. Like it doesn't matter. Like none of it matters. And that's kind of the pattern now. Every time something goes wrong, it's ignored. Every time the process breaks down, it's brushed off. Because the goal isn't precision, It's just getting to the end result as quickly as possible. And somehow, he still plans to drink it. After everything, the handling, the exposure, the visible breakdown of the ingredients, there's no hesitation. It's still treated like a finished product, something that just needs a bit more time before it's ready.
Now we're gonna strain the mead fruit into a glass and through a strainer. And I'm spilling it all over the place. Okay, that didn't work out as smoothly as I thought it would. Oh shit. One little piece isn't gonna hurt. This is gonna be a bitch and a half to transfer, but it's a labor of love. I'm gonna put my hand over it while we pour it in here. It is what it is. But like I said, I'll be drinking this homemade mead in about a week or so, give or take. You know.
At this point, it's not really about making alcohol anymore. It's about pushing the limits of what he's willing to consume. And just when it feels like it can't get more extreme, he shifts away from the homemade drinks for a moment and does something completely different. Something that, somehow, manages to be even harder to watch. Because instead of experimenting with liquids, he decides to experiment with food again. But not in the usual way. This time, it involves something that was never meant to be eaten by people in the first place. And the reasoning behind it makes even less sense than everything before. This time, he decides to bring cat food into the equation. Not just a little taste test for curiosity. No, he decides to build a burger. And not a regular burger. Oh no, this is a meatless, sauce-only Big Mac topped with Fancy Feast creamy cat food and King Oscar sardines. Because apparently, that combination is the pinnacle of culinary achievement. And he eats it on camera like it's perfectly normal.
I put this Fancy Feast Creamy Delights chicken feast with some King Oscar sardines on this meatless Big Mac. But can split it into like 2 sections here. Maybe it'll increase my chances of getting some pussy. Like I care. Ending sickos is more important than ending my dry spell. Fighting for female and male equality is more important than ending my damn dry spell. Ridiculous.
And after the cat food burger, he doesn't stop because he's already in the mindset where rules are optional, where taste is subjective and danger is irrelevant. He goes back to mead making, only now it's a full-on dessert alcohol apocalypse. He combines bananas, honey, sugar, peanut butter, chocolate syrup, Reese's cups, and even bacon bits. Because why not? If you're already making something that looks like it should be labeled biohazard, adding every sweet and savory thing in reach makes perfect sense. And just like before, it's all mixed in by hand. No measuring, no hygiene, just chaos.
Got 2 bananas. Local honey. Peanut butter chocolate syrup. want the bacon bits to do it because it's already cooked and cured, so it won't get all funkified and rotten. Just for shits and giggles, we'll add a little bit of Jif Creamy. Just a little splash of that.